Hello, this is part 5 in a series of 7 videos on using the golden mean in astrology, and in this video I'm going to describe what golden pyramids are. Golden pyramids are one of 3 kinds of 4-planet patterns that involve a lot of golden ratios. So these 3 kinds of patterns are golden strings, golden pyramids, and golden isotraps. I described what golden strings are in part 3. In this video I will describe what golden pyramids are, and in the next video I will describe what golden isotraps are. Now each of these 3 very special golden mean 4-planet patterns requires a special ratio of planetary angular distances, obviously. So you have 4 planets arranged in a certain way, particular angular distances between them, and also the angular distances must be in a particular order. Let's review what the golden string is. The golden string has increasingly larger angular distances in either a clockwise or counterclockwise direction. And here's the example of a golden string that I showed in the 3rd video in this series in the chart of actress Monica Bellucci. Her moon, Uranus, Neptune, and Saturn form a golden string. And one way to think of the golden string is that if you take the shortest distance, the moon Uranus, and you multiply it times 1.618, you get the next distance. And if you take this distance between Uranus and Neptune in this particular chart and multiply it by 1.618, you get the next distance. So they are angular distances increasingly larger. In her case, it's in the order of the zodiac signs, the counterclockwise direction. It could also be in the clockwise direction, that the angular distances are increasingly larger by the golden ratio. So here I summarize that. In Monica Bellucci's chart, the moon-Uranus angle is 39 degrees 26 minutes. We multiply that times 1.618. We get 63 degrees 48 minutes, which is very close. It's a 13-minute orb from 64 degrees 1 minute, which is the actual angle. So multiplying it, we get 63 degrees 48 minutes, very close to the actual angle of 64 degrees 1 minute, so it's within orb. I explained the orbs in the previous videos in this series of videos on the golden mean. And if we take the 64 degrees 1 minute, multiply it by 1.618, we get 103 degrees 35 minutes, which is very close to the actual angle between Uranus and Neptune, which is 103 degrees 3 minutes. By the way, I'm multiplying by 1.618. I'm not getting the exact angular distance because the golden ratio is not exactly 1.618, but that's, pretty close. So there are the 3 angular distances. Moon to Uranus, 39 degrees 26 minutes, Uranus to Neptune, 64 degrees 1 minute, and Neptune to Saturn, 103 degrees 3 minutes. And it's a golden string. Now, I'm going over that to contrast it with the golden pyramid. A golden pyramid is similar to the golden string. It also is a pattern of 4 planets. It also has 1 direct midpoint structure and 2 golden mean midpoint structures. So these 2 patterns are extremely similar. Let me repeat that. Both the golden string and the golden pyramid involve 4 planets. And those 4 planets form a direct midpoint structure, means 1 planet is conjunct or opposition 2 of those planets. And there are 2 golden mean midpoint structures, meaning that there are 2 cases among these 4 planets where 1 planet is at the golden mean between 2 others. Now, why do we use these terminologies, golden string and golden pyramid? The reason we use these terminologies is because a golden string is similar to a midpoint string. A midpoint string is a string of planets not involving golden means. So we have a thing called a string, and we have another pattern called golden string. We have a pattern called a pyramid, or midpoint pyramid, and then we have a golden pyramid. Let me show you on this next slide what I'm talking about. A string is simply 4 planets equally spaced. So if A, B, C, and D are planets, say it's Sun, Moon, Jupiter, and Saturn, and the angular distance happened to be 50 degrees, it could be any number of degrees, but I'll just pick 50 as an arbitrary number. if the angle from A to B is 50, and B to C is 50, and C to D is 50, they're all separated by 50 degrees, then obviously B is at the direct midpoint of A and C, because it's 50 degrees from each, and C is at the direct midpoint of B and D. We call that a string. And the golden string is a similar idea, except instead of being the same distance, the distances are increasing by the golden ratio. Now let's go over what a pyramid is. A pyramid is when you have a direct midpoint structure. C is in between A and D. So we have 25 plus 25 degrees equals 50 degrees, and 50 degrees, so C is at the midpoint of A and D. And then you take one of these sides, it could be either the CD angle or the AC angle, and you divide that in half. So we call it a pyramid. We call it a pyramid because it's like building blocks. Maybe it's not the best term in the world, but it's like it's building up from little components to like the peak of it at C. It's probably not the best term in the world. But anyway, C is directly between A and D, and B is between A and C. And the golden pyramid is the same idea. C is going to be at the golden mean of A and D, and B is at the golden mean of A and C, but it has to be in a very specific relationship, which I'll explain in the next slides. So here is the golden spiral and golden pyramid. Or spiral. This was an old term we used for golden string. We've since dropped this term. It's still here on this slide, but we had an older term of spiral for string. We had an older term of helix for pyramid. And we've changed the terminology because we discovered that golden spiral is an already defined term in geometry, which can be slightly different. So this is the old terminology. You may see it appear once in a while. We dropped it fairly quickly, so you won't see it often, but golden strings and golden pyramids. Okay, a golden string is a kind of a string. So here it is. Suppose the angle between A and B is 38.2 degrees, B to C is 61.8 degrees, and C to D is 100 degrees. This is exactly the kind of pattern that Monica Bellucci has in her chart, increasing by the golden ratio. So you end up, in this case, with C is at the golden mean, B is at the golden mean of A and C. I put here GM for golden mean. And what I was going to say is that C is at the golden mean of B and D. And you also end up with a direct midpoint structure that C is directly between A and D. It's just how the arithmetic works out. That's the golden string that I described in part 3. The golden pyramid, by contrast, is where we have C at the golden mean of A and D. So what you do is, here's the big midpoint structure, the big golden mean midpoint structure, and then we take the long side. You have to take the long side. So this is a total of 100 degrees. This is 61.8 degrees from C to D. It's 100 degrees from A to C. You take the long side and you put a golden mean midpoint structure on the long side. And the golden mean midpoint structure has to be in the opposite direction from the big one. So one has to be a GM3 and the other a GM6. So in other words, going from left to right, C is a GM6 golden mean between A and D, meaning it's the 0.618. It's the long way, but notice A to C is the short way. So if you take the distance of A to C, you put a golden mean, but put it so that you're using the golden mean that's closer to A. Remember, there are two golden mean midpoints between any two planets. So one of them is a GM6, the other is a GM3. So it's a very specific pattern. It can take a while to get used to this. You don't have to memorize it. It's just a 4-planet pattern that makes two golden mean midpoint structures and a direct midpoint structure, and it requires a very specific layout. again, the layout is that you have a golden mean midpoint structure. You take the long side of the golden mean, because whenever there's a golden mean midpoint structure, one side is shorter than the other. You take the long one, put a golden mean midpoint structure on the long one, and make sure that it's in the opposite direction from the big one. So C is closer to the right edge, and B is closer to the left edge. So this is a GM3. It's if you're going from left to right, and C between at the midpoint of A and D is a GM6. So it's a very specific golden mean pyramid, but you can see why we call it a pyramid, because you have a planet at the golden mean midpoint of two others. You take one side and you put a planet at the golden mean of those two. And if it's in just the right relationship, you have a golden mean, or a golden mean system, which we call a golden pyramid. So a very specific relationship of the planets to each other will produce a very similar effect as a golden string. And that's just the way it is. I know it's a little complicated at first, all these specific angles, and you can feel like you're going dyslexic or you're getting confused. It's just a very particular relationship. If you want to memorize it, you think about it enough, you'll get it. It's not that essential to memorize it. All you have to know is that very specific relationships, angular distances between the planets, will create these very special patterns. And what's special about it is, out of the 4 planets, you have 2 golden mean midpoint structures and a direct midpoint structure. You'll have C at the midpoint of B and D. So that's it. The golden string and golden pyramid, very, very similar patterns. They're different, but they're similar in that they both involve 4 planets. They both have 2 golden mean midpoint structures, and they both have 1 direct midpoint structure. Also, by the way, a little bit of terminology. I mentioned here that originally we came up with the term golden spiral. We're dropping that to use the term golden string. And if you ever see a reference to golden helix, that's an older term for golden pyramid. But we've now settled on this terminology, golden string and golden pyramid. And also there's something called a silver pyramid. A silver pyramid, let me go back to the previous slide, is the same as a golden pyramid, but this midpoint structure, for example, could be a GM6, just like the larger one. Then you don't get the 2 golden mean midpoint structures and direct midpoint structure. You don't get all of that, so it's a little bit weaker. The more midpoint structures formed between the planets, the more intricately woven together the planets are, the more powerful the energy system. So a silver midpoint structure is very similar, but not exactly in this order. Or if B was between C and D, instead of, if it was in the short side instead of the long side, any deviation from this exact layout we would call a silver pyramid. With, we're using this idea like gold is the most precious element, metal, and then silver, maybe not the most precious, but you get the idea. We always often have metals like gold and silver. So a silver pyramid is similar to a golden pyramid, does not have 2 golden mean midpoint structures and a direct midpoint structure, so it's not quite as powerful. So there you have the terminology and what goes on. Again, I know this is a lot of information, can be a little bit confusing when you first hear it, but that's the way it is. I'm trying to make it as clear and simple as I can, but the way the geometry works requires a little bit of thought. You can't just hear it once and automatically get it, or at least a lot of people have to think about it a few times to understand it. It's the way nature is. Sometimes nature is very simple and you can just understand it as it's told to you, and sometimes you have to think about it a little bit. Now, Monica Bellucci amazingly has both a golden a golden string. There's that old term again. A golden string, which I showed you, the Moon, Uranus, Neptune, Saturn, which is in red. She also has a golden pyramid, which I've put in blue here. It involves 3 of the same planets. Uranus, Neptune, and Saturn are in both a golden string, that's the red, and a golden pyramid, which is blue, if her ascendant is very accurate. if her birth time is off 5 or 10 minutes, she doesn't have it. But we'll show it anyway because it is there given the birth time, and it illustrates the point. And here you see that Neptune is at the golden mean of Saturn and Uranus, just like we said before. And obviously the long side is here. This is the longer distance. This is the shorter distance. Whenever you have a golden mean midpoint structure, the two sides have different lengths. This is the one that's about 64 degrees. This is the one that's about 103 degrees. So you take the longer one, and if there's a planet making a golden mean, a planet at the golden mean midpoint between Saturn and Neptune, but we want it to go in the opposite direction. So instead of long to short going clockwise, we want short to long, and that's exactly what happens. Is that the ascendant is 39 degrees, rounded off. It's 39 degrees from Saturn to the ascendant and 64 degrees from the ascendant to Neptune. So it's a golden mean midpoint structure, but notice if you're going clockwise, you got the short length, then the long length. With the big one, you have long length and short length. Or if you go counterclockwise, it's the same thing. You have short length, then long length for the big one, and then for the small one, you have long length and then short length. So it's a pyramid, one planet at the midpoint of two others, and then another planet at the midpoint of the two that have the longest distance, and it's in the opposite order in terms of the short and long distance. So anyway, that's it. If you got lost on all the technical details of how this pattern is formed, that's okay. Just remember, it's a very special relationship between four planets that creates two golden mean midpoints, Neptune at Saturn, Uranus, and ascendant at Saturn, Neptune, and the direct midpoint structure, which is Neptune at ascendant, Uranus, being 64 degrees from both. So she has both the golden string and the golden pyramid, and the two patterns share 3 planets. So in her case, if her ascendant is accurate, she has an incredibly powerful pattern of 5 planets, or 4 planets plus the ascendant, 5 different points. Of course, we don't know if her time is extremely accurate, but if it is, that would be incredibly powerful and almost unique. Almost never happens. What does it mean? It means her sensitivity, her spiritual aspirations, her imagination is off the charts. It's just out of this world, and maybe that's why she's a superstar. But in any case, that demonstrates what the golden pyramid is. So we will see more examples of golden pyramids in part 7. So again, this is part 5 of the 7-part series. But before I show you some more examples of golden pyramids, let's cover the third and last special pattern, which is golden isotraps. So in part 6, the next section in this series, I will describe what golden isotraps are. And then in part 7, I'll show you the results of another little study where we go through the database and we find people have these special patterns. And we'll see some more examples of golden pyramids in part 7. So you're learning about these, to summarize, you're learning about these 3 very special patterns, the sacred geometry, the way that nature works, that creates these very special geometric patterns is just awesome. So even people that aren't interested in astrology or don't believe in astrology still can learn about this fascinating geometry, the way 4 points can create these beautifully intricate patterns. It's quite fascinating. And from my analysis of this, I believe that these are the only 3. Maybe I've missed something or overlooked something, but I'm pretty sure I've got this right. These very 3 special ways that 4 points can be arranged. And I believe they have a tremendous importance in astrology. I think that's my last video. Oh yeah, just the final one. Thank you for watching the video. I appreciate it if you subscribe or you like some videos. Often at the end of these videos I give the 5 websites that I'm involved in. Here I just mentioned the one, astrosoftware.com, that makes the series. software that I'm using in these videos. So that's it, my friends. Thank you very much for listening. In the next video, we'll cover the third and last of these special golden mean patterns, the Golden Isotrap, which is also fascinating. Again, thanks for listening. God bless. Namaste.